I love everything you're saying. I want to steer now to the first few years of our life. And I know I studied psychology in college,
Mm.
and I knew emotionally and personality wise, they said 99% of your personality is developed in the first 7 years of your life. So I made sure I was a stay-at-home mom. I was the one that was going to be there telling my kids how to act, how to be, and I hope I did a good job. I tell them every day, I'm like, let's get the therapy out now before we go. I don't want to be called when you're 30 years old saying that you have mommy issues. Let's get it out now. But I wanted to make sure that obviously I'm not perfect and I made my mistakes, but I wanted to be very intentional with my
Mhm.
parenting for those first couple of years. But when it comes to longevity, let's talk about how important the first 7 to 8 years are, the biological patterns that are being laid down, not just with personality, but physically, mentally, and maybe even spiritually.
Yeah, this is the interesting aspect of longevity, right? We get into our 30s, 40s, and 50s, and we start to think about longevity. Usually that's kind of when it kicks in, right? In our 20s, we're invincible, right? And in our teens, we don't want to listen to anybody else. So it's really in those sort of middle years we start even thinking about this process, usually. And a lot of the work in gerontology in particular is around how do we help people in their 60s, 70s, 80s, and beyond stay healthy. But again, we don't talk about what's happening in those formative years, right? There's a reason they call them our formative years. And it even extends into the womb, right? The patterns are being laid down at that level. And to be honest, we really want to get technical. It's even happening before that. We can pass on generational aspects, right? In our biology, in our mental and emotional processes. But in those sort of first from conception to about, 7, 8, 9, 10, there's no real cutoff. But those years are when our microbiome, right, is not set, right? So if we're breastfeeding, if we're eating natural foods in that first year or two of life, that's going to actually influence the qualitative component of our microbiome, the bacteria and the all the microbes that inhabit our GI tract, right, which are fundamental to inform our immune system to help us digest food, to carry out all kinds of metabolic activity. So there's important aspects there. Do we have a vaginal birth? Right, that's informing our skin, our all those the vaginal microbes go into the mouth and populate the gut so that we can take in breast milk. I mean, it's unbelievable the brilliance that is infused into this process of becoming human. So that's important, right? And then we have our nervous system, which is forming, right? So it's going to the way the nervous system functions. You can kind of think about it as a gas pedal. Is it going to be revved up or an engine rather? Is it going to be a high revved engine, or is it going to be a low idle where it's chill? Right? This is actually informed by our environment. Do we live in a crazy, chaotic, the perception of a lack of safety in our environment as a child, as a 6-month-old, as a 2-year-old, as a 4-year-old? We're perceiving all of this information because look, we're open energetically. We don't have our prefrontal cortex is not online yet. We are in theta. We are just totally like consuming everything that's coming in, and our system is reading and responding, right? So we are constantly adapting to our environments. So whatever consistent information is coming in, whether it's from food, whether it's the temperature, the amount of light, even in the atmospheric pressure, the social environment, right? These are the sleeping patterns. These are all informing our system. And look, because we are such adaptive creatures, our system, again, our microbiome, the way our nervous system functions, our brain chemistry, everything is going to start to adapt to the inputs that we're perceiving. So those formative years really are going to dictate our metabolic function, how our nervous system is idling, so to speak. Are we able to drop into a parasympathetic state? Or because of our chaotic mental and emotional environment, are we perceiving threat on a consistent basis such that our nervous system is idling high? Our sympathetic tone is so charged up that even when we're on a beach relaxing with friends, it's still high. Right. So these are all fundamental aspects. And if we think about how, this concept of epigenetics, this is how all these energetic inputs influence the expression of our genes. Right. So this is a really important concept because all of those things that they become our patterns of operation. And again, we develop personalities based on these too. And we develop different types of walking through the world, right? Some people become wallflowers because they don't want to be seen. Some people, that's all they want to do is be seen and heard, right? So some people are perfectionists. That was me, right? And so these all come from, there's psychological aspects to this. There's emotional components to this. There's also neurological components, right? So all of this is embedded in our tissues, in our mental sort of frameworks, our ideas, our beliefs about the world. All of that's happening in those formative years. And then we carry all of that form and function with us into adulthood. And we think when we're, 25, 32, 48, 60, we think I'm my own person, but really a majority of what's happening on the biological level, as well as on the sort of conscious, cognitive, emotional, mental level, a lot of that is laid down patterns that happened when we were, preteen. So we're operating mostly from the past, and there's a reason for that. It's because, again, that's the subconscious aspect of who we are, right? And that comes from those patterns. We couldn't possibly deal with all of that consciously, right? So we are so adaptable. We are so wired to become patterned. That's what happens. And so we can undo all that. We can repattern ourselves. We can repattern our brain, our neurology. But so much of what's carried forth does happen when we're preteen.